Hey, before we get into the chat around this trade war, the tariffs, and all that stuff, remember if you want to join the Facebook group, there is so much spam on Facebook. Just put, when you click join, how did you hear about this? Put the episode number. Put, I heard it on episode 815B. We'll know you're not spam. So it has been, before we press record, I said there's been some good fodder to talk about in recent weeks and days and hours. Look, I want to start this whole big thing, tariffs and trade wars. Maybe we start with what exactly is a trade war and how does, sounds like an old word.
Well, I liked because I thought we kind of moved beyond trade wars and excessive levelling. Maybe we'll return to situation normal, but let's see how the world evolves. A tariff is basically a tax on imports, and it's paid by the importer. So if I import whatever from overseas, I have to pay a tariff to the government, and generally speaking, I'm going to pass on that tariff to my customers.
Well, I've been saying you've really got three.
Well, that's the thing, and tariffs are fundamentally paid by the customer. They're not paid by the President Trump
says they are,
which is not true. It simply isn't true. Basically, if the US imposes tariffs on imports, it's not the Mexicans or the Canadians or the Chinese that are paying the tariff. American businesses and American customers, consumers, will pay the tariff. And so it's a tax on imports. The aim is to try and reduce demand for imports and increase demand for your domestic suppliers. A trade war is essentially countries doing battle using the weapon of tariffs. So if I raise tariffs aggressively to try and hurt another country's trade, they respond by raising their tariffs. Does it work? Generally, it does more harm than good. Higher tariffs basically mean higher prices and lower growth. That's the bottom line.
So my little printout here that I did a reel on Instagram, if you want to follow us on Instagram, everyone, there was an existing 20% tariff on Chinese imports. I don't know whether it was some products or all products or whatever, we'll just call it 20%. Liberation Day happened, Brian,
Yes.
A day that we'll all remember. Where were you on Liberation Day? The US basically levied a further 34% on imports into the US from China, and that's a total 54% tariff. China then said, all right, we're going to do 34%. So stuff that's coming in on 34% from America to China. Trump on Wednesday the 9th, yesterday, said, all right, bro, we're now at 102% on Chinese imports.
Yep.
Which is this is just wild.
Yep.
Then overnight, because China have said we're an immovable object and Trump is saying he's an unstoppable force. What happens when those two collide? Well, the end of time.
Correct. It's not pretty at all. No.
So China said, okay, we're increasing it to 84% in a reply. It's an arms race of taxes and tariffs. And then overnight when the S&P 500 basically went up 9.5%, Trump said, well, China, we're at 125%. And he's ultimately said at the moment, we're pausing the reciprocal tariffs for 90 days and we're keeping a base 10% globally. And he's now saying we can negotiate with trade partners. I mean, talk about uncertainty.
Absolutely. And put it this way, you're going to have to negotiate a whole bunch of separate agreements with theoretically 150 countries, or more. You probably only have to negotiate with a relatively small subset of those, but it's still going to be a very long, difficult process. And in the meantime, it's just more frustration, more uncertainty, and a higher cost of doing business. It's certainly no way to run a country and no way to run a government. But this is where we are. I think we really just don't know how this is going to evolve. Unless you can get inside the head of the President of the United States, then you really don't know how this is going to evolve.
Yeah.
But one thing we do know is that do trade wars work? No, they don't. They tend to be very destructive to the global economy, not just to global trade, but to the economy. They impose costs on business and consumers. So they tend to not work.
Yeah.
Trade wars have a habit of leading to something worse. To the extent that trade wars are a measure or an indicator of underlying tensions between different countries, who knows where that leads to. So this is no way to really run the global economy.
Yeah. And given the last 24 hours at the time of recording, when this episode goes up on Thursday, the 18th of April,
who knows what could be.
These numbers might mean nothing.
Correct.
And that's why I just want people to understand the principles and the concepts. Why does China matter so much to the globe and particularly Australia?
A few things there. Look, firstly, China is currently the second largest economy in the world, and it certainly has been responsible for a massive share of the world's overall growth.
Well, it's the world's factory.
Well, pretty much it has been.
Yeah.
But its economies continue to develop. It certainly has seen somewhat slower growth in the last few years, aging population, slower productivity growth. But certainly it has been responsible for a massive chunk of the world's growth. It's the second largest economy in the world. For Australia, it's been a key export destination. We have basically provided the commodities which have helped construct the modern Chinese economy. China is currently our largest trading partner and is likely to remain so for quite some time. We've been a key beneficiary from China's rise. We've actually had to steer a fairly careful course between acknowledging that we have disputes with China over the last few years. We know that. We're still, the US has been our key defense ally for decades. And so any tension between the US and China, whether it's trade or otherwise, we're kind of meat in the sandwich there a little bit.
It's probably important to call out what the US or Trump is doing to China effectively is what China did to Australia in relation to the wine exports.
Yes, although the interesting thing with that is, China's measures that they imposed on Australia, they were certainly carefully crafted in the sense that—
Was that a political response to the government at the day being dirty on China?
You know what? I think it was actually, to be honest, it sounded a bit petulant on China's part.
Yeah,
really.
That's what I kind of
thought. But it
thought.
was sort of a signal. It was saying, look, at the end of the day, don't take us on. We're going to impose some restrictions on bits of your trade that actually aren't going to be a killer punch for your economy. They're going to be a damn nuisance. But we're going to impose measures on particular items that are a nuisance to you and have no strategic value to us.
And I think it's like when you have such a powerful country and even personality, there's that ego where you want to say to people, I need to remind you who's in control.
That's pretty much what the signal it gave. And it wasn't just Australia. Australia was kind of used as a bit of a signalling tool there because while they were imposing annoying trade measures on us, we were able in a number of cases, to redirect those exports somewhere else. But also it was a signal to the rest of the region saying, don't take us on because look at what's happened to Australia's trade. So it was a signal not just to Australia but to the wider region that they are the 800-pound gorilla in the Asia-Pacific region. And so in that sense, it was a signalling tool not just to Australia but to the rest of the world. It wasn't helpful, and those measures have now largely gone away, which is terrific. But I think there's a greater problem at work here. Trump looks at trade in a very, very simplistic way. He is largely wrong about trade. This idea that if the US is running a trade deficit with a particular country, that country must be ripping the US off is just a myth.
It was funny. I saw an Economist Instagram reel, and it was a really good example. There was a country in Africa that supplied diamonds to the US, and there's, of course, going to be a trade deficit.
Yes.
Because they're not going to ever buy more from the US being a small nation than the US buying the odd diamond. And I think the guy was like, it's like if you walk past the jewelry store and they're upset at you for not buying a diamond.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. A lot of these trade measures, a lot of the views about trade that come out of the White House are just frankly just nonsense. Let's be honest about this. this idea that you can eliminate trade deficits with every individual country is just a nonsense. Trade deficits are determined by a whole range of different things. And this idea that you can micromanage your trade deficit at the country level is just quite silly. And one of the analogies I saw on social media was it's sort of like saying to Coles or Woolworths, look, I'm going to steal some fruit off you because I have a trade deficit with you because you don't buy anything off me, but I buy stuff off you. So I'm going to steal stuff. It's like, let's see how long that lasts. So again, a lot of this stuff is real nonsense. The world realised over the last 100 and something years that gradually lowering tariffs and doing business internationally was more efficient. It made for a more productive world. It raised the living standards of everybody, some countries more than others. But this idea that the US has been pillaged by other countries for so many years is just a myth. The US has benefited from a relatively stable, relatively free trading economy around the world. The US has been a beneficiary of this. That's not to say there aren't particular sectors or particular workers that lose out from trade from time to time. That's inevitable as well. But generally speaking, the whole world is better off from having relatively free trade.
Yeah. Hey, we talked about, that trade deficit.
Yeah.
I think the scandal for Australia, and even there was a senator just a couple of days ago grilling one of the Trump people or whatever. Australia has a trade surplus with the US.
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means that we basically buy more from the United States than they buy from us. And
so based on that, the what's the word? The vibe, or what's the word? Like
I think
the basis of these tariffs imposing because of trade deficits on these countries, it actually is just rubbish given that they've put a tariff on Australia.
Yeah, that's right. And I think one of the other sort of silly arguments you've heard, Australia sells us beef, but they don't buy any of our beef. It's like, why would we buy your beef when we have a surplus of our own beef?
And yours is rubbish. It's full of
we're not
mad
forcing
cow.
you to buy. We're not forcing you to buy our beef, but somehow you do. Well, why is that our problem? The other myth out there that's been peddled by some people in the US administration is that they look at Australia's GST, which is a value-added tax, and say, well, you're imposing a tax. It's like a tariff. It's like, no, it's not. The tax is imposed on any goods and services sold in Australia, whether they're imported or whether they're locally produced. So it's not the same thing. This idea that they look at the GST and say, you're imposing a tax on our exports to you, and they're basically saying it's kind of like a tariff. That's a myth as well. It's yet another bit of nonsense that has come out in this debate.
Yeah.
I also think that when you think about the tariff measures, if you're worried, if you fundamentally believe that you need to take on China and you're using tariffs as a signal to do that, it would be nice if you actually presented a united front to balance out China alongside your allies. But if you're
also some logic in your rationale.
Correct. But also, if you think about the geopolitical implications of what Trump previously announced and is now suspended, he's whacked, 25% tariff, 24% tariff, for example, on Japan.
Yeah.
It's absolutely key Pacific ally. Why would you do that? To impose these tariffs on countries whose support you probably will need at some point. And the other thing is that China has certainly been trying to raise its influence in the South Pacific, in the rest of Asia, but also in Africa. So there has been a competition for influence, if you like, between the United States and the West and China in these emerging economies. Now, if you want to actually force some of these countries further into the arms of China, you seem to be going the right way about it.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
How can you then these countries would look at the United States and say, well, we thought you were kind of a reliable partner. How can we treat you as a reliable partner if this is how you're going to treat us and how you're going to treat some of your closest allies? The damage to trust this does, trust in the United States as a massive power that essentially tries to do the right thing, even if sometimes they don't. I just think that trust has been damaged for how long, I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, when Elon basically, what do they call it? The first bro of the USA. Like I've been saying for a few weeks, like how long will it last with Elon on his lap? I don't think it's going to be too long. We know a couple of things. Peter Navarro, who's basically Donald Trump tariff advisor, he's basically in a fight with Elon at the moment.
Yep.
Who actually, fun fact, get this, I've heard on good authority that Elon Musk is the next Bond villain. That's a lie, everyone. That's fake news.
It's fake news.
But and I don't. Someone said just the other day, and this is why I think the rift with Elon and Trump will actually break.
Yes,
is someone said Tesla, they're not an American car manufacturer, they're an American car assembler because a lot of the products are coming from overseas.
Well, certainly, this is the thing. The car industry has been globalized for years. Is there any such thing as a truly American car or a truly Japanese car? Because a lot of these manufacturers source parts from all over the place. That supply chains have been globally integrated for decades.
Yeah.
And this idea that, imposing a tariff, because you want to protect American car makers or defend against Chinese imports or whatever, it's a failure to understand how globalized supply chains are. I just don't think the US administration truly understands how the global economy works.
Yeah.
And so they don't understand or they don't care.
Or they
about
do, and it's so calculated what they're doing.
I'd like to think
that's scary.
If there is a grand plan and a grand strategy, it's not a very smart one. To call it a strategy probably overstates the sophistication of it. It's actually very simplistic, very damaging, and I do think it has a lot of people scratching their heads about, does Trump really know what he's doing? I suspect he doesn't.